Seek above all for a game worth playing. Oh baby, it's witchcraft contagious. I felt it for ages. We're out of these cages in this house of mages. It's witchcraft, it's dangerous. Beware of these pages. There's spells of all flavors in this house of mages. In this house of mages. In this house of mages.
Hello and welcome to Make Yoga Magic Again, the House of Mages podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Erulian Cuming. The aim of this podcast is to bring together a range of talks, topics and discussions with inspiring humans, sharing our own personal journeys in yoga, tantra and magic. If you enjoy what we're creating, hitting that subscribe button or sharing this episode with a friend is the easiest way to support us doing more of it. So without further ado, in this episode I chat with Aristotelian Amorist Anja Rose Tyrrell. So thank you for joining me. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think we were sharing before. I'm good. I'm going through like a major life transition, and it feels like how are you feels so broad. I'm definitely in a integration realization phase. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, there's lots I want to dive into. We just had a little technical error. We did a little Kali mantra before we tested everything. Mics were working. Did some Kali mantra drop in. Mic stopped working. Lots of static, but we're back in action. So
we're back.
So thank you to all of you for your patience. Obviously, you have no idea that any of that happened, but more so thanks to Anja for her patience. So I would love to start with a little bit of what you would, because we're going to dive deeper into what you actually do, but if you could give a broad little elevator pitch of what you do.
Great.
And then we'll start with how you ended up kind of your journey into that, and then we'll start to like add in the little pieces from there.
Thank
but
you.
It's just interesting to see where people start.
Yeah, and how, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and what you would label yourself.
Thank you for that initiation into the label, because it's something that I've been really pondering, particularly for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Because I'm so multifaceted.
Yeah.
And so I think at the moment, what I would say in like a 3D level is like I'm a student of psychotherapy. I've been studying shamanic practices now for, I would say, almost 5 years. And I've been in the yoga meditation teacher realms for almost 9 years. And I also, I'm studying love, sex and relationship coaching with Layla Martin. And I guess one of my main focuses of what I do is particularly teach women how to experience high vibration, more pleasure, and to be in their true alignment. And to also, I guess that's on the energetic plane, but it's nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
And trying to bring all of these beautiful holistic modalities together and teach women how to, I guess, like reignite their blueprint or their imprinting as a woman.
Yeah.
And through that as well is kind of deepening their understanding of how to call in, I guess, like the divine masculine and have an experience polarity in their life, or a more tantric experience in their life. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much I want to dive into straight away, because a big part of why I wanted to chat with you, because we've bumped into each other on the Sunshine Coast multiple times. We've nearly had these, like, I think we both realized that we could end up getting into these big conversations, but we're like, probably not a good idea to do it right now. We'll get to it eventually.
Absolutely.
So I'm really glad we finally got to it. So I guess the main thing we can start with is that you actually have, it's interesting because you're in a kind of what I would call a neo-tantric kind of world and modality, but you are one of the rare people that I've met that have actually had a classical tantric training, because I think I either read or listened to it in another podcast. You grown up around Hare Krishna. Your mum was a Hare Krishna.
Yes.
But then you've gone into Tantric Buddhism as well from there.
Yes.
So I know that they're interrelated, but my understanding is that they're also quite different. the
quite
Hare
different.
Krishna. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, I'd love to hear how that kind of progressed, how you ended up
Yeah.
getting there. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, obviously there's a whole story behind there, but I would say that, I did my yoga teacher training back in 2000 and I think it was 15.
Yeah.
And I actually met one of my, longest friends / teachers / we have this very karmic, I guess, teaching relationship between each other. And he actually introduced me to Dzogchen, which is a Tibetan Buddhist, very ancient Tibetan Buddhist lineage, which is kind of a part of the core of Tibetan Buddhism as a whole.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I experienced perhaps another way, or not another religion, but another, I guess, what would you call it? Like another lineage that really invigorated or had the embodiment of what I know as Tantra. And so Tantra for me is a very Hindu lineage, but it emanates through many different cultures and they just have different language for it.
Yeah.
And so what I experienced with him, it was like absolutely an initiation into the divine masculine, divine feminine. And I got to have, not my first, but a very tantric lovership with him. And this experience really, I guess, initiated me into kind of calling it or honing in on my own inner masculine, because it's a very, you could say on the outset, masculine lineage. It's usually Tibetan Buddhism particularly is all men, you'll see. But you'll see over the years, over the last 100 years even, it's transitioned and there are more women monks coming and being a part of this culture, which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so what I really loved about it is the discipline, and I guess it has a direction. And although I haven't fully stuck to that direction, I've got to experience a plethora of lineages now. At the time, it really served me because it really helped me feel like I was moving somewhere with my spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did it feel after growing up with Hare Krishna to move into the tantric path? Like, would you have considered yourself fairly Hare Krishna, like focus in your kind of, like, were you exposed to a lot of different religions growing up, or did you feel like you had one specific coherent framework of understanding the world through that lens? Because I'd love to know, because I feel like Tantra, like classical Tantra, is quite paradigm shattering.
Yes.
In the way that I feel like it actually holds space for all other belief systems, and that's why I like it. But at the same time, you're like, oh wow, there's actually like something behind the curtain.
Yes.
And so it's kind of being confronting, like being like, okay, you're told that this is the entire world, and Tantra is like, hey, we're over here behind like that curtain, and yeah, it's kind of,
it can't be ignored.
Yeah.
And it is, we could say on some level it is everything. Just like when we say, I'm a yogi or I do yoga, there is a difference. Like I am a yogi versus I do yoga or I teach yoga can be very different, because yoga obviously meaning union, right? So that's the way that we go about every single thing that we do in our lives, from the way that we drink and eat and communicate. It's not just going on the mat. And I think that I hold that Tantra is the same principle as it is a way of life and a way of being. And so I didn't grow up with a strict religious per se upbringing, but my mum was very devoted to health and spirituality, and she's very psychic. So we grew up plant-based mostly, I would say, and with, I guess, the understanding of other realms, spirits, angels, gods, goddesses. I feel very lucky because it felt like a very magical upbringing. And my mum was never indoctrinated me into like, this is the way you have to live.
Yeah.
But it was still quite strict at the time comparatively to the way that my community or my peers, my friends were living.
Yeah.
And so it really imbued me with magic and medicine that I didn't really want to have anything to do with in my teens. And I felt very open. Like I had friends in primary school who were Christian and Catholic and all of these other religions that I was aware of. So I didn't feel like it was the only way. It was just a way that felt like home to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what really kind of came about was after kind of the traumatic experience of my teens, I just kind of had one of those awakenings. I think Eckhart Tolle speaks about this. He was kind of sitting on a park bench and just awakened. It was like I just woke up one day after some, alcohol abuse and was like, I'm never drinking again. I'm going to fully change my life. Wow. And I really honed in. I'd been doing yoga at that time between 18 and 21. And I decided in that moment that I was going to study, yoga for my own evolution. And that's really the core moment. It's like that first spiritual or coming back to self when I was 21. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'd love to dive more into what you were saying about your kind of like tumultuous childhood or teens, especially if you're okay to talk about it. Because I think it was just really powerful listening to in another podcast talking about it and how you kind of felt like you had grown up really quickly. Like at 12 you started drinking and partying and things like that, and also just how you explained that people saw you as this like wild, fun party girl, but like little did they know all the kind of stuff behind it that ended up kind of coming to a head around 18. I'd love, if you could expand on that a little bit if you're okay, because I just found it really powerful. Your share.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So, I share this story with no sense of desiring or needing pity from anyone. I feel like I've integrated a lot. And what's so funny at the moment as I'm moving through healing different parts of my mummy and daddy wounds, I've healed through some of the most intensive trauma. And it's these things that you think you can move through. Oh, that's the easy stuff. I'll worry about that later, that are impinging on me the most at the moment as an adult.
Yeah.
So I had and experienced, I guess, a different array of sexual trauma from a very young age, from family members and caretakers who were supposed to look after me and keep me safe. And I think that instilled in me, obviously, a trauma response from a very young age and a level of disassociation from reality. And I couldn't read properly or write, or I know that there's definitely some learning, I guess, infringements, you could say, around, potentially being Asperger's and having ADD and all of these coping mechanisms, obviously. And that really led me to kind of experience, I guess, like suicidal ideation from a very young age. I probably was, I would say, around 8 when I first experienced like the thoughts of death and not being here, not wanting to be here, but also like different ways in which that might happen. And I think that led me on the journey of self-destruction, because I had all of these feelings and I felt very much suffocated in my ability to communicate, because I couldn't communicate or tell anyone what I'd experienced. One, because I was experiencing a lot of shame around perhaps the, what's the right word, like the sexual breaches that I had.
Yeah.
And that kind of took me into a spiral from about, between 11 and 12. It was actually before I went into year 7. So I was turning 12, I would say. And I, started drinking bottles of wine from my mum's cupboard. And my parents do not drink. So often anything that was in the cupboard were gifts from other people, over the years. Like I think I've seen my mum have 1 glass of wine in my whole life.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like an influence in my family. There's not like a heavy addiction or anything like that I was surrounded by. And that kind of escalated into, years of substance abuse. And I wouldn't say that it was any more than any other teenager, but it just started very young.
Yeah.
And I was severely depressed, and it kind of led to tumultuous relationships, both in my female friendships and, also in loverships. Like I had quite a physically abusive boyfriend between 13 and 16 that, really impinged on my self-worth and my sense of reality. He was very physically abusive, and that led then to the next kind of round of abuse or self-abuse when I was 16, and the drugs and the partying kind of really escalated. So that kind of took me to a place when I was 18, and I just spoke about this recently at Enlightenment in the Bedroom, where, I fell pregnant to an older man, and it wasn't the pregnancy that upset me the most, but it was the abandonment. He basically, what would you say, left, didn't want to know anything about it. And I was like, can you just pay for my abortion? Like, I'm not going to have the baby. But there was no emotional connection around it. Yeah. So that led me to a spiral and kind of took me out of my capacity to have any sense of reasoning. And that's kind of when I went into my overdose. And so I had come home one night from a night out with my girlfriends, and I took everything I could find in my mum's cupboard, which wasn't a whole lot. It was mostly just Panadol. And obviously was the whole reason for that was so I didn't have to wake up, the next day and have the relived experience. Yeah. And unfortunately, I say that unfortunately with a little bit of humour behind it, because I have moved through it. Because the comedy behind it was like I woke up in shock that I was still alive. And it was this huge like, oh, fuck, like I'm still here. Yeah. Oh, fuck, I didn't take enough. And so obviously at that point, my girlfriends found me and took me to the hospital, and I was going through an extreme overdose, and I went into what you would say like suicide prevention and suicide watch for 2 years. But that experience is what led me to yoga. And also Tantra. And so as much as that experience has been something that has kind of, I wouldn't say haunted me, but I have experienced suicidal ideation for a lot of my life, not all of it. It's something that I healed through because I found yoga and like my sense of spirit. And although that I didn't fully have my full awakening at 18, it was enough that it led me on a path to 21, which is when I really changed my whole life. Yeah. And what I'm really grateful for is that at that time I met someone I went to school with who'd just been living in an ashram. He was a few years older than me, and he'd been living in an ashram and studying Tantra, and that was my first tantric sexual experience, like after that period. And that was the first time I got initiated into this new way of relating with men. Yeah. And knowing that there was a spiritual experience that was available to having sex. And particularly because sex for me had been so violated for most of my life, and always projected onto me, and having boys grab at me and do everything to get their hands in my pants. And I had no boundaries, because I was like, oh, this is what it means for someone to like me. This is all I'm worth. Yeah. So then having this experience when I was 18, and then, meeting my first tantric experience was like, whoa, sex doesn't mean that anymore.
Yeah, I'm interested to know, like, what was happening in your body during that experience, because, like, it just would have contradicted everything your body would have known up until that point. Was there a lot of like fight back from your body? Like, when, obviously you had a good experience, but then is your body trying to, what was the experience there, and like, how did you navigate that?
During the tantric sexual experience?
Yeah. So I guess going from all, because there's more that I want to touch on back from, I want to rewind in a moment, but just while we're onto it, just because of everything you've led up to that, having those experiences and that, relationship with sex, and then it basically being completely different experience that you used to, but I guess your body being in defense mode and all that sort of stuff up to that point as well. Yeah.
I think one of the key points here was being led by the masculine, someone that you could say, when I reflect now, that I probably wouldn't have, as an adult meeting that version of him then, I wouldn't necessarily trust him, but at that moment I really trusted him, like we had a language that we spoke around spirituality and yoga that no one else had been able to meet me in, except for my family, or my mum at least, pardon me. And so there was that level of initiation into being led fully, and that allowed me to surrender. And as much as there might have been some nerves, I was kind of just in a flow state of deep presence and being. I wasn't going like, what's happening? I can't really be here. It was like one of those experiences where you melt into the magic and you're so present because the energy and the vibration is so high. Yeah. And it really, there were some moments, of course, like I remember at the end, you could say, it was like a 6-hour kind of extravaganza of just like spiritual alchemy, you could say, and towards the end, when you could say he wanted to ejaculate, like he gets up politely, like gets up and flips upside down onto his head, and he's drawing the energy back up his spine. And that was probably the only moment that I was like, this is so humorous. What's he doing? What do I do?
Yeah.
I'll just sit here and meditate, you know, and like he's upside down in meditation, and I think he chants a mantra or something like that happens. And it's just a movie moment where you're just like, what is happening right now? This guy's like upside down. What's he doing? Like he's not ejaculating. Okay. Like I didn't understand that concept fully.
Yeah.
And that helped invigorate men. Obviously, one, if you want to talk about sex in a tantric form, obviously lasts longer in the bedroom, can be more present with you, have more life force energy. Like there's a whole beautiful alchemization of what's going on that now I'm like, wow, like this is available to all of us, and particularly men, so many men who struggle in the bedroom. So yeah, that was probably the key moment where I was like, this is available, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's so interesting. And it would have been hilarious to see after like having that, it's like, I feel like it was the absolute opposite extreme end.
Yes.
So yeah, it would have been really interesting. So I'd like to touch on more of that soon, but before we get too far away from the original story, there was one key part of the story that happened when you did overdose and you're in the hospital, and you said it felt like you might have actually died. Like you described kind of like feeling like you're separated from your body, even like hearing the beeping of the heart monitor kind of flatline. But also one thing you said was that it reminded you of when you used to practice lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing as well that I've always been interested in, what is death and like what is life and all that sort of stuff. And I've had some, similar kind of like depressive tendencies as I was growing up. But once I started to delve into spirituality and specifically Tantra, I'd like to know as well if it's a similar thing for you, in that I realized there's nowhere really to escape to. It's like, this is all just a playground. There's different levels and different aspects and different realms to it. But this is all like, it's all part of the same experience. And actually being able to talk about death. I feel like in the Western world, it's so taboo. Like sex is taboo,
Yes.
death is taboo, and money is taboo, usually. Those
Yes.
three subjects. So we can't talk about any of them.
Yes.
But yeah, so just to circle back, so I'd love to hear about your experience of like the liminal kind of in-betweenness of the worlds, how that relates to the lucid dreaming, and then we can expand on it later when we talk about the plant medicine stuff.
Yeah.
There's just so many things. Sorry if I sound a little bit sporadic. I'm just a little bit excited because I've got this long list of things I want to talk to Anja about, and I'm trying to make sure that I both touch on all of them and do it in a somewhat cohesive order. So
yeah, I'll try not to jump the gun. I can sound like, oh, there's so much. There's
I know.
so much that has happened in my life,
Yeah.
and there's multiple timelines that are existing at the same time. So I'll try to like block the timelines as best I can. So firstly, what was actually I'll get to that point in a moment, but yeah, the experience in the hospital when I overdosed was, and I just shared this experience again recently as I was really reflecting, it was like this experience of, which I'd had a lot as a child, but I think, you know, my teenage years really blurred out my capacity for my intuition, my psychic abilities. They were there because I have a very heightened psychic sense. However, obviously dulled down from all the, you know, partying. And so when I was 18 and having this experience on the hospital bed where I actually came out of my body, and it was like I was floating or levitating. I wasn't that far, to be honest. Like if I look behind me, I was not even a meter. I was half a meter above my body. So I hadn't fully committed to the transition yet. And I was just looking at my girlfriend sitting on their phone, like next to me in the room. And the thing that caught me, which is what you just shared, is the sound of the heart monitor. And when it flatlines, it goes, woo. Because I was like, oh my God, I'm like, you know, I didn't really realize I'd left my body, but I was kind of just present with it for a moment. And then I was just kind of looking around, seeing my friends, and I realized I was looking down at myself. And it was that moment that shocked me because I was like, oh, and then the heart monitor went. And so that almost shocked my spirit back into my body. And I definitely had once again, the movie moment of coming back into my body and then kind of accelerating my whole being up, like taking that first breath again, like, oh. And I was looking at my girlfriends and they were kind of just looking at me like, what just happened? And to be honest with you, I didn't even share it with them at the time. I didn't share it with anyone. I've only shared it in the last few years as I've conceptualized it more. And that kind of activated, I guess, in terms of like the lucid dreaming, I think what it really activated is it reminded me of the pathways and how close we are to the spaces in between from if we are just frequency, which is my belief, is that the veil is so thin, the other realms, the other worlds are sitting right here with us in the space and we have the capacity to meet and touch them. And I see this as like, when you watch, what's the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio with the Inception?
Oh, Inception, yes.
Yeah, we have the capacity to have that as a lived experience, and that's how I see lucid dreaming. And so I think that experience was like the inception for me to rewire the space or how close I am to the other realms, which is, led to me having some kind of spiritual experience that led me back to yoga. And so what really happened was I've always been a dreamer my whole life. I didn't understand dreaming until early 20s, which is when I met my beautiful friend. I'll say his name, Ben. I know he'll appreciate that. And he also introduced me to Dzogchen, and he introduced me to dream yoga or lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite practitioners is Charlie Morley, and he has an incredible book of practices, and he's a very modern Tibetan Buddhist. He's a rapper, he's a hip hop dancer, but he's so devoted to, I think he's more in the Mahayana lineage, he's not Dzogchen. Yeah. But in the Dzogchen lineage, there is an incredible book called The Crystal and the Way of Light. Okay. And Dream Yoga, and I'm just trying to remember the rest of the title. But basically I realized how all interconnected these lineages were. I was like, oh my God, my whole life makes sense. Like I've been, most of my intuition, or I have premonitions and they always come through my dreams, and I've really suffered a little bit because I experienced night terrors up until 5 years ago. And it was very distressing for me because these anxiety dreams led to a lot of insomnia, lack of sleep, constantly living in between the worlds and feeling like very afraid a little bit to live because often my dreams would come true. And so this made living very difficult for me because I was always preempting a potential experience, almost like the butterfly effect. I'm like, I can't go back and change this, but I go into a freeze response because I'm like, something's going to happen. And the only person that really ever understood this was my mum. She's an incredible dreamer. But then I met Ben. And so he introduced me to a more disciplined way of studying lucid dreaming. And so he is a prolific lucid dreamer. Like he's been studying devotionally since I've known him. It's been almost 9 years. He studies every single night. He trains in his dreams. And he's the only person I know or have ever actually met who is like 100% devoted to his practice. And so he often dreams about me, or I dream about him, and we have shared dream experiences. And I definitely have not been as devotional as him. It comes very naturally to me, but I can see that I can go lucid, but I'm not in the space right now where I could, say, manipulate my dreams. Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting, like on so many angles, because I think a lot of people don't realize that yoga was originally, like, all the movements were designed to get you into this, like, trance-like state. Hence Shavasana, corpse pose.
Yes.
So you can actually have, like, a lived experience of, like, the death experience, or close to. And so it's like, because the lineage of Tantra that I practice is really focused on, like, the 5 or, like, the 6 layers of self. And so it's kind of like the physical, and then mind, emotions, and then you've got the kind of, like, subconscious or pranic or the dream realm, but then you've got the collective unconscious. So like the dream realm is kind of like the bridge between the conscious mind, emotions and physical world, and then this like mysterious like collective unconscious, and this is where we get into where people are getting like downloads from and stuff like that. But then also like that pure field of source awareness. And so it's like that key that not only is it like a fundamental part of yoga, and that's what yoga nidra is. I think yoga nidra these days, most people are like, oh, it's just like a nice little sleep, like just gonna go to sleep, and it's fine. But
Yes.
you know, people forget that's actually like, training to be like a psychonaut, or like a, you know, kind of like to lucid dream and all that sort of stuff. So I'd love to know, even if you just want to drop like one or two little experiences of it that was just like, wow, this is, because I think a lot of people like, why would you do it? You know what I mean? Because people, you know, I guess might not see the benefit. So yeah, just like what would the benefit be? What's a cool experience? And what's a little technique? Because I've read quite a few different techniques. I'd love to know what techniques you use to get into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those states.
So there's a few questions there. Let me track them. Okay, so firstly, why? From my understanding and what my, I guess, life principles where they sit now is that us being human and having this 3D experience is actually death training. We are actually not necessarily here to be having, yes, we're here to be having a human experience, but we're actually training ourselves to jump through the hoops of samsara and actually enter another realm. And that could be depending on what lineage you are, because the body as a human form, obviously it exists right now and we have this experience, but I believe our soul or our spirit lives on. And so this is earth school right now. And so what my belief is that lucid dreaming is a part of the initiation. Lucid dreaming, and you could say the practice of Tantra or yoga or whichever lineage that you resonate with, is teaching us how to transcend from our human bodies at the moment that we die. It is to bring the most consciousness you can to that moment as you pass over. So, for example, I mean, the extreme version of this in Tibetan Buddhism is the rainbow body. I don't know if you've seen or heard of the rainbow body. It is one of the most profound. It actually makes me cry. I'll share a video with you on my Instagram that my friend sent me recently. But they train and spend their whole life so that when they pass over, they're basically their body stays, their physical human vessel stays, you could say slowly, very, very slowly decaying over a long period of time. But the soul and the spirit has transcended out. You can see it as a rainbow.
Okay.
And so that is like extreme practice.
Yeah.
And not many people have achieved it, and they're all very devoted Tibetan Buddhists.
Yeah.
But you could say in this lifetime, how can I have the closest experience of transcending through samsara as, you could say, as a version of me that's still living in the 3D realm. And so what do I have access to? It's like, this is our opportunity. We've been gifted and blessed that we are here on earth to have a choice to go, how can I allow my spirit to keep living on and moving through its karma? This is my perspective anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as well, if you...
please, jump in.
I was just going to say, because I think it's like, I feel like it's all linked. So, for example, that's saying exactly what you said, trying to keep as conscious and aware as possible while you're transitioning to death. I've tried to do the same thing falling asleep.
Yes.
I tried to, like, you know, observe the process, see how far I can get before I fall asleep. I've tried to do it during like a plant medicine journey, like when I've got really deep, just see how long I can actually keep aware. And it's like, and it felt like it was like a death. And so even with orgasm, right?
Yes.
And it's funny that the word in French, I forget what it is.
Le petit mort.
Yeah, the little death.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all linked. Yeah, it's just, anyway.
It's all linked.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So I love that we get to geek out on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why. My belief is that, for example, like let's say I was aware when I left my body, which I was for a hot moment. I was aware in that moment that I'd left my body, which was hilarious at the time because actually I'd released all the drugs and everything through a stomach pump or something. So it wasn't like I was fully in the OD, but I left my body after, you could say.
Yeah.
And so if I was aware enough in that moment, my spirit wouldn't have been confused about where it was going. It would have had a direction. And so I see that the discipline of choosing a lineage is deeply important because it gives you a pathway to lead your spirit forward from your body. It allows you to transcend the ego because the ego is the human body that we're attached to. So we're teaching our spirit and our soul to be able to leave the body from a healthy place, which is why lucid dreaming is so important, or learning how to astral travel is deeply important, is because it is teaching us to let go. It is teaching us to let go of the ego realm. And I guess, you could call it the realm of the hungry ghosts or...
Yeah, and I love that. I think it touches on a really good point of why would we learn a tradition, and because there's so much available. We're just overloaded with information, and a lot of most people that we talk to in the New Age community, it's like, oh, I'm spiritual, but I just kind of pick and choose, which is fine. But for me, it's spiritual journey is building a vehicle, and especially in this case where you're trying to build a vehicle for a journey to transcend from into the other realm. And if you're just being like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a wheel from here and this, and you're just coupling it together, and it looks like you've got a pretty good vehicle, but then when you actually go to use it, it just falls apart and doesn't actually work. And so I feel like that's what a lot of these coupled together spiritual systems are. They look okay and they look like they're going to do the job, but when you actually go to drive them, they're not getting where they're needing to go. But yeah, so I'd love to touch on your perspective on that from someone who's actually delved into a coherent tradition pretty deeply. But then the neo-tantric kind of new age community, I don't think they see the benefit or understand why you would follow in. They're almost completely against it. It's they're like, no, that's too
masculine.
Yeah.
So I would say we're experiencing the polarization of the masculine and the feminine, and that's why I eventually moved and shifted a little bit into the sacred sexuality, neo-tantra, tantric realms, you could say, is because I experienced such a masculine discipline, and I, for a lot of my life, have always wanted to be one of the boys. I want to keep up with the boys. And I think because I thought if I was one of the boys, there was a lot of things around because then I feel safe and no one's going to have sex with me. I think that was the underlying message there. But the reason it is so important to stick to and find a lineage is because we as human beings, we're so addicted to the new quick thing that's going to get us there.
Yep.
And so one of the most profound teachers, I think, currently is Mantak Chia. He's a sacred, obviously he's a Qigong master, but he's practiced, I think, the same 2 or 3 techniques for 80 years or something. 80 years. And people say, don't you get bored? But he's reached a level of self-mastery that no one else has reached, you could say, in our era, perhaps. There's probably more we don't know about. But let's just say he's one of the most known. And I think that there's something to be said in the subtlety of learning how to manipulate energy from the subtle body rather than going and smashing a vinyasa class. Well, I dare you to lay down in corpse pose or yoga nidra for hours upon hours and hours and actually integrate your experience, because we are so attached and addicted to the quick thing that's going to get us there the quickest. And I say this to myself because I've also been one of these people and still dabble in that, We're so disattached from feeling our feelings because we feel so deeply uncomfortable in our bodies and all of the things we haven't communicated, haven't given space for our trauma, haven't grieved, haven't, the list goes on, right? So we get to this point where everything feels so tight, we want to combust, so we choose the fastest roller coaster.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time that's breath work these days, I would say, or a fast vinyasa class, or a smash your body pump class.
Yeah.
And it's bringing people back, and we need yang energy, but it's bringing people back into the essence of yin, because yin is actually really yang, and sometimes you can flip them and they're the same end of a different coin. Is that the right terminology? Something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really what I want to get across around people choosing a lineage. And you can't tell anyone whose lineage or what lineage that is, because everyone's belief systems are so different.
Yeah.
But I would say that a tantric lineage, a Tibetan Buddhist lineage, or even a Taoist lineage, they're kind of my three main, I guess, my hustles that I've interweaved medicine from, definitely feel like they validate and expand across all lineages and belief systems.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just good to see what a cohesive system looks like.
Yes.
You know, because I think if you never actually, if you're only taking little bite-sized pieces, and that's the thing, we often take the parts that we like, and you know, then we never get the opportunity to see the blind spots. And that's what I think like a cohesive system is. You both get to see your blind spots and the uncomfortable stuff, but like you said, you also get into the subtleties.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, we were talking about everything's linked. It like applies for everything. Like the more, like even like food, like if you slow down and like eat your food and get the subtle taste, and you know, you're going through a bit of a cleanse at the moment, like when I've done a cleanse before, like everything just became so much more potent.
Yes.
You know, when you slow down, and even in relationships, like it's like fast food relationships as well. It's like, it's so easy to just like, you know, have quick relationships, and as soon as it gets a little bit uncomfortable to just move on to the next. But like personally, I don't know, I'm interested in yours as well, that, you know, when you've actually spent a lot of time with someone and got to the subtleties, it's just a completely different relationship, completely different experience. And yeah, getting into the subtle energy body is like the key part of it all. And if people don't spend enough time getting into that, they just never realize. And like you said, they go to heavy breath works and all that sort of stuff. And like you actually mentioned in one of the other podcast interviews you did, about that sometimes going to those experiences are going to have the opposite effect. You know, it could be dangerous to go to like these really hard-hitting experiences, because you know, you could come out in the other end a lot worse off than you did initially. So one thing I just quickly want to touch on as well is, because you mentioned Taoism, and you'd obviously know this talking about Mantak Chia, is that most of what we think of as like sexual tantra is actually from Taoism. Like it's like, it's mostly like Taoist tantra. And so we're like, oh yeah, you know, like Indian tantra is so sexual. It's like, you know, like the Taoists like, hey,
absolutely.
Yeah, and so a lot of people don't even realize that. So I'd love to like touch on that, because you do qigong and stuff as well. Yeah.
I've been a little bit out of practice, to be honest with you. I had a teacher that I was online with. He was in San Francisco for a little while there, and so I first got introduced to, I guess, Tai Chi and Qigong from a pretty young age, actually. I did karate and I did Muay Thai, and I've always been into martial arts, and I got introduced in very brief moments like Qigong and Tai Chi.
And so you'll see straight away, like, because I like did a lot of martial arts, why it's important to have a cohesive system.
Yes, absolutely. And I love discipline, particularly for, I would say I'm someone who has a very chaotic mind and a very chaotic psyche. Having discipline and a structure is very important for me. I'd say I'd have a dysregulated feminine, you know, woo, all over the place. And so, but when I first kind of got I got introduced to Mantak Chia quite early on, and David Data's work and things like that. Just, you know, understanding men's sexuality from quite a young age, you know, I would say around 20s. And then I've really got into Qigong and energetic, what you might want to call energetic mastery. In no way am I a master, but that was what the training was for. When I was 25, I started shamanic energy training. And so this is why nervous system regulation and energetic mastery is so important, is because I would say most of us are in a constant state of fight or flight, or a functional fight or flight, or a functional freeze. Most of society is. We're walking around very dislocated from our bodies, and often our spirit is wandering, like we're kind of half attached by cords. And Qigong, I think, is, or even tantric practices, but let's say Qigong specifically, I feel like is almost like a non-negotiable when it comes to obtaining a high, like, spiritual awareness or consciousness. And the reason why I say that is because most people want to jump into the plant medicine, including myself. I did that. Most people want to jump into the realms of magic and shamanic practice with extremely ungrounded roots.
Without preparing their vessel.
Preparing their vessel. And so a lot of people, we're dealing with minds that are disturbed and distorted. And if you send them off into a magical shamanic realm or plant medicine experience, most of the time it can cause further damage because they don't know how to integrate it, right? And I'm one of these people that struggled with that. And so Qigong was an incredible foundation initiation for me when I was 25, because this was like, yes, this is the missing link. And basically my shamanic teacher at the time, basically, they don't really teach, they're like, you can't have the shamanic initiations unless you do Qigong. Like they won't teach them.
Yeah.
They won't really, you might be able to do some like spirit animal activation stuff, but they won't really allow you to do it unless you do the whole set.
Yeah, well, your vehicle like isn't designed for the journey, I guess,
Yes.
and you won't be able to hold all the like the energy and the realizations, and sure.
So that was when I first kind of really got introduced to my first proper Taoist teacher, my shamanic teacher. She was a Taoist and lived in a monastery for 7 years overhead at one point, and she's been studying in the arts of shamanic space holding for almost 25 years, I would say now. And it was an amazing discipline, and I think that it's something that I've always really wanted to master, and I have a desire to go and train with Mantak Chia and do some of his retreats. I haven't done that. He's got an incredible online course, sacred sexuality training, and I guess a lot of microcosmic orbit and energetic mastery stuff on there. He's profound. I actually think he just brought out an app as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so for anyone listening, if you want to get into Mantak Chia.
I didn't know. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's new. It's very new. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, there's so much I want to touch on. Because, so because obviously you're helping, so you're working with couples and you're working with women and men solo as well?
I am not specifically working with men one-on-one, although it's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I would like to, because I know there are incredible men out there that can teach men, but I know that there is medicine that I can offer as well. And it's interesting, although I'm not taking paid clients, I probably have 3 men that are close friends that I'm feeding tantric philosophy to. Yeah. And I finished that book. Okay, what's the next practice? And I'm kind of initiating them through. They're like, leaning on me for guidance until they can find their next kind of teacher, you could say. So that feels pretty special that I'm being looked to in that way from some close friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So how do you start to bridge the gap a little bit? Because like, how do you feel in a world where a lot of people are talking so like explicitly about tantra? We've got tantric massage and all these different things, and I get it. Like, I get where it's all coming from, but how do you approach that like gently but also trying to bridge the gap a little, being like, cool, that's really cool that you do tantric massage. Like, what do you feel is tantric about? What is tantra to you, and all this sort of stuff and aspects, and bringing it in. So what's your experience with merging into that world, and how you're bridging the gap, and just, I guess, like, how you stay cool about, because without being I'm just trying to figure the word for it, just being like, it's cool, like, that people don't know what classical tantra is and stuff like that, but trying to bring that across a little bit. Yeah. Because I see some people who are deep in the classical tantric world just get so annoyed with Neo-Tantra, and there's this divide. Definitely. And there's like, you're never going to educate people on that.
Yes.
It's like when I was into veganism for years, people just yell at people. It's like, people are never going to listen to you. You need to like bake some cupcakes. Instead of just screaming at people, bake some cupcakes, like give them to them and be like, oh, there's actually no animal products in this. Oh, who never knew you could make muffins like that?
Yes, exactly.
So, so what's your experience with that, and what's your approach in that?
Yeah, thank you. This is something that has been a part of my initiation, is like, although I have studied, you could say, a few different forms of classical tantra, I never claimed the word or told people that. And that was because it was so associated with sex. And only this year did I really claim that online, and I've studied it in different lineages, and I didn't want it to get distorted. And I think because there was so much distortion, and what I've really come to understand is that we are in a phase of like such deep evolution. Yeah. And I really believe that there is, I'll start again. So
you can keep going. I'm just turning the aircon down.
Yeah,
it's
great.
a little bit cold in here.
Cooling down. So I'll go back. So I really believe that we're in a phase of evolution, and that sacred sexuality and Neo-Tantra absolutely have its place. And I think that particularly as it almost feels like the initiation or the reclamation of the goddess energy is really coming back into the sense of what it means to be a woman, and a lot of karmic timelines are being played out in a lot of women around their sexuality. We're really seeing that, particularly, you could say, in the Byron Bay community. In Australia, particularly, that's, I would say, Melbourne and Byron Bay are kind of the hubs for that. And it has been very distorted. As much as there's some incredible medicine there, it's also very distorted, and it's got blown out, and it's kind of given perhaps women a freedom to express themselves sexually in ways that they couldn't before. But it is being misconstrued as Tantra. And so when it comes to tantric massage, although it's something I've never specifically offered, but perhaps I've done in a partnership, the difference there, I would say, is the intention and initiation, because a tantric lingam massage is very ancient and very sacred, and the intention is very different to someone who wants to give you a massage for pleasure and so that you ejaculate and so you're having orgasms and stuff. Is, you know, it's a massage, but it's not necessarily tantric, and I think that those labels have been cross-contaminated.
So I'd love to hear just what makes something tantric for you. What is tantric? Like, if someone's like, what is tantra? And like, what makes it tantric?
Definitely intention is the first thing. But I would say a tantric experience for me comes with a presence of the energy and an energy body, and the integration of the subtle energy as well. So a tantric experience has more of an intention around the embodiment of creating unification in the body and in the presence of another being. And the intention for me is to obtain a deeper sense of liberation and spirituality, or a closer connection to God. That for me is a tantric experience. And it is not goal-orientated in that it's sexually goal-orientated, but it's goal-orientated in the unification of energy. Now, you can do these you could say you could do tantric practices on your own. And I think traditionally in Hinduism, it was very masculine. Only men did these practices, and perhaps maybe in Taoism too. Might be getting them crossed over, but let's say it started off as a very masculine, I'm doing this for me and my energy body to obtain enlightenment. And then they realized there was something missing, because there was all like the integration of the yin and yang. And I think they realized that they needed the feminine body to be a part of this initiation to reach God. It is not just self-actualization, it is a unification of actualization and the integration of the masculine and feminine. And I think that when we have this experience, what actually happens is, you know, we're opening up the channels, or let's say people want to have, and they're seeking to have the Kundalini experience, which you can experience on your own. You're opening up the channels of, you know, the masculine and the feminine, the Ida and Pingala. And the only way to do that, and the only way to really transcend the energy up the base and up the spine, is through certain techniques and practices. And why would we do that though? Like, why would we do that, right? Why would anyone be interested in doing any of that? Well, one, you could say back then it was to obtain enlightenment. But two, I think in our modern day and age, is to create harmonization and unification in the energy system. And that would be the most simplified version of that. Because so many people want to have these spiritual experiences, and they're doing extreme breathwork experiences and blowing out their nervous systems, or extreme plant medicine experiences. And there's, once again, they haven't learned how to deal with subtle energy. So now they're going to blast their nervous systems with, you know, this really intense energy. And yeah, you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, there's a few things I want to... So one thing I did want to just quickly touch on is the word God. So it's a very loaded word, very loaded subject. And like, I would like to unpack it a little bit, because I think it's such a healthy thing, because it's such a widely used word, but I feel like it's actually the most like widely and differently understood word. We just all assume that we mean the same thing, but I'd love to know what your interpretation, because based on what we've talked about, like the whole source energy, and like, and especially with your delvings into plant medicine with your relationship with death and and lucid dreaming. Yeah, what is God, Anja Rose Tyrrell?
I feel like once you've done enough plant medicine, you realize I am God.
Yeah.
And, you know, it ends up being a bit of the cosmic joke when you come out of an experience like that.
Like divine madness.
Exactly. And so I've never had a perhaps I've never really experienced negative connotation from God, about the word God, because I wasn't grown up with that being ingrained or indoctrinated into me. Although I did experience, you know, outside of me, people having an affinity with God, and perhaps some negative experiences. I've never felt like I felt a twinge of the societal negativity, but I haven't experienced myself in my body. So God feels quite freeing for me, and it feels very universal. And I understand why it can feel triggering for a lot of people, which is why obviously saying things like source, divine, finding a word that really encompasses you to experience the absolute wholeness of you and oneness of you. And so as much as I've spent a lot of my life seeking outside of myself, and I think that anytime I've gone to plant medicine, which was the first time when I was 22, I experienced psychedelics with mushrooms. And that was I'd been meditating for almost 2 months in Bali, and had been doing yoga like 3 times a day. And I was just like, I felt the most kind of aligned in my human body as I'd ever felt. And so I had this plant medicine experience where I'd taken a lot of mushrooms. I don't even know, it could have been up to 5 grams. I just handfuls of them. Just, like whatever, just go with it. And it was one of the most interesting that you were speaking about death, is because I was so present with the experience, and all of my friends wanted to party and go out, and I just sat on the beach, and there was skulls and like dead bones, of course.
All the dead bones.
bones.
I was trying to revive them.
Yeah, not in real life, but in my trip experience. And I just felt so at peace. Like there was just this sense of peace. And so plant medicine, I feel, is like the accelerated initiation into understanding death. It is to get you, and it can really help and support some people to get through the ego mind and transcend you out beyond the human body really quickly, so that you are just all of a sudden experiencing perhaps a level of consciousness or a level of God, like experience that you've never experienced or could fathom before. And that is something that I think plant medicine is so useful for, is because it helps us transcend the ego very quickly.
And how's that invigorated your like love of the physical reality of the 3D? Because I think a lot of people talk about death and, you know, kind of worry that it's going to lead people wanting to go into that space. But for me, it's been the opposite. Like once I've like had a relationship with this concept of death and what, you know, how we can even explore it a little bit in our physical body, and how important it is like to do that in this physical body for all the reasons you mentioned. Like, so how has it reinvigorated like a zest and love of life, and that you like know you want to be here?
I really believe it's that sense of devotion and appreciation of why we practice. And what I mean by practice is being devoted to a lineage, or practices that keep you connected to that sense of experiencing God or wholeness within yourself. Because a part of me has a belief system that God first, then life, meaning I can't show up in the space of connection with you fully if I'm not deeply connected to myself. And so having a connection to source consciousness or your highest self allows you to feel the embodiment, I guess, of your truest self, and therefore you get to show up as authentic as you can in all of your relationships. And I think that that's been a huge one for me, is like, how can I show up as authentically myself? And I can only do that or be in that vibration the closer I am to that experience of meeting God. And you can have this in so many areas of your life. Like, it's about experience all of the pleasure, right? From the way that we eat and the way that we walk and how we view the world. And I think that I experienced so much grief and so much pain physically in my life that these plant medicine experiences really allowed me to just, as much as they were very intensive, they really hit the grief points and the areas that I was holding on into my body that I couldn't let go and I couldn't enjoy and be present. And once those traumas and those grief points were released, I could take a deep inhale and a big exhale, and I was like, I'm here. I can feel myself now, because before I was kind of in a trauma state, not really understanding why I'm here, where I am and what I'm doing. And now I feel like, I can find acceptance in the fact that I'm having a human experience.
Yeah.
I'm having acceptance now that I'm being earth schooled. And I'm in acceptance that ultimately I have choice. Whereas before you were in a more of a victim state of suffering.
Yeah.
And that makes everything you do feel like hell. Nothing's enjoyable. And so being able to come back to appreciation and gratitude for like, oh, holy fuck, like I just traversed the universe, but I get to come back to my body, which for the first time feels like home.
How do you get out of that victim state, or at least like not necessarily get out of it completely? Because I think everything, like, you know, the yin and the yang, and like that victim state is it's energy that we feel something is wrong and something needs to be changed, and it's energy to do that, but it can end up flipping it into like feeling paralyzed. In one of the other podcasts you did, the person interviewing you made a really great comment on that they were posting in these Facebook groups about anxiety, and when they posted about asking a question, you know, what has anxiety taken from you? What does anxiety continue to like hinder you in? And all these comments about how bad anxiety was, you know, which is completely valid. But then when they actually posted and said, what is everyone doing today to, you know, overcome the anxiety or to make it more capable or to do things in spite of the anxiety or to meet anxiety with like grace? It's like crickets. And so, yeah, how do we start to transmute what we call victimhood into something productive and beneficial overall? Feels like, yeah, it's like the question, I guess, you know,
amongst many questions.
Yes.
That's a big one. And I don't really feel like I have a very definitive answer, but what I would say is that you have to find the one thing in your life that gets you up and out of bed or that gives you hope. And for me, what that has been previously was yoga. The feeling that yoga gave me in going to a class was the one thing that really was like, okay, this is saving my life now. I can breathe. I'm learning how to breathe, and I can feel my body.
Yeah, I remember you saying in an interview that you cried, you just wailed after a yoga class because you realized that's why you're not going to die. Well, that's why you're not going to end your life.
Yes.
Because of yoga. I was like, oh, dude, like yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what yoga taught me was how to experience, you could say, unification or osmosis or transcend. Perhaps I walk into yoga feeling very anxious and I don't really want to be there. I don't want to show up because I have to feel.
Yeah.
But what the breath really did, teaching me how to deeply breathe properly or use Ujjayi breath, was help me transmute and transcend the energy through my body so that I was being led by my breath and being led by a highest level of consciousness rather than my ego. And that can be very profound and it can feel unavailable for lots of people. But when you really train your body to be so present with the breath and keep bringing yourself back to the breathing, I'm thinking about, I've got to leave because I have to get out of here and I have to get to the other place quickly, and once again, breathe it in. And that level of devotion to that breath was the key. And I believe that why people are so anxious, we could give 1,000 reasons, but usually it's because we're not breathing properly. And the breath gets stuck in the upper level of the chest, your diaphragm's not pressing down on the gut, therefore also people are experiencing digestive issues and everything. So we get up here and we're short breathing, and that's creating angst in the body. The cells aren't invigorated with oxygen, your blood's not running properly. And so I would say that's the simplified version. And I know that people can feel really upset around their anxiety because it can feel very uncontrollable, it can feel very lonely, and it can feel very life-consuming. But all I could say is this, is find that one thing that allows you to be in your breath. And it's not about going to an intensive breath work, holotropic breathwork initiation. It's about really honing in on the subtle breath, because that level of consciousness, you need to use that in your everyday life.
And you feel like just finding acceptance helping support to not be in any other state, like just to
Yeah.
be okay with being in that state. Because I feel like that's what Tantra and Stoicism, if you have looked I feel like
Yeah.
Stoicism was like Roman Tantra.
Yes,
it's like one of the biggest things. It's just like not not wanting to be in a state other than the one you're in.
Yes.
I think Tantra and Stoicism both say that this is like most of suffering is the fact that like you're sad and don't want to be sad. It's not that you're actually sad.
Yes.
It's that you don't want to be sad. That's the issue. So if you just like, it sounds like from what you were saying is just like tools to just be with what it is instead of like trying to reach outside and just trying to not be in that state. Just like, I'm here. It's okay that I'm here. I'm going to make being here a little bit more okay with the breath.
Yes.
And then I can move on to something else as well. And that's what I love about Tantra as well, is just that everything is fine. Like everything is perfect. And I think that everything is on the same playing field as importance. There's like not really a hierarchy of like, this is actually better. Talking about death as well, like how you saw all their skulls and all that sort of stuff. Like to have like that vision of all skulls is on the same like importance or same awesomeness as like a rainbow or like, beautiful meadows and all that sort of stuff as well. And it's just all interpretation. And just on that subject, I'd love to just circle back quickly onto that concept of source energy or God from your perspective. In that, how do you feel when people start to speak of what God or what source wants? Because in my like experience and perspective, as soon as that thing that we call God has an agenda, it's no longer that to me.
Yes.
It's like it becomes this lesser like spokesperson deity for like a very particular idealism.
Yes.
For me, like the truest essence of what is God or what is source, it's before it makes any decisions, before it has any judgments, that pure thing that everything comes from.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a similar perspective or?
I see this in many different ways, whether it be God or people working with particular goddesses or deities, and they give over their power or their sovereignty to something that they've identified to being higher than themselves. Therefore, that's firstly already created separation.
Yeah.
And so this can become very dangerous, because this is where people say, well, this entity made me do it, or I've been told I need to do this. And I think that it really takes away someone's autonomy when they are creating separation from that being, you could say. And also there's a lot of like tricks, there's a lot of let's say negative entities, a lot of trickster energy, and there's a lot of skewed perceptions of God, goddesses and deities in our collective consciousness that are being siphoned, I would say, for energy and manipulated and also like abused for people's power. And so if we want to come back to, let's say, the pure divine essence of what God's source consciousness, the divine is, it has my belief is that it has no agenda. It is that feeling in that moment of pure oneness and consciousness state where everything exists at the level of like the deepest peace, acceptance and knowing you've ever experienced. And it also becomes a state of nothing. It is a state of nothingness. And
everythingness.
And everythingness, exactly. But the ego, once it has that realization, goes into like, oh, what does that mean? Now I'm enlightened. I've had this amazing experience. And then we try to put context to something that I believe has no words.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the manipulation of the energy happens. And I think that we fall back into the cycle of unconscious and conscious and unconscious and conscious, is because the ego body is constantly trying to grab on and grasp and conceptualize, in a spiritual sense, things that can only be experienced through the body and a deep sense of knowing.
And I guess adaptability, because that's what Christopher Wallace is like my main tantric mentor, and he did a really good talk on the ego. And basically the summary was, ego is fine as long as it's fluid and it's not like solid. Like as soon as the ego like is static and it holds on to something, then it becomes an issue, because that's when we lose the ability to adapt, to change, to shift, to grow. But yeah, as long as it's fluid and it's okay to change and adapt and all that sort of stuff, it's fine. And that's the thing as well, that like we give, you know, we try to give something that exactly like you said is completely unlabelable. It's the thing that, you know, can't if anything can't be labeled. It's sad, but yet we need to give that strong opinions. We need to give, like, write it on stone. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it's really, really tricky. And I feel like it makes people very uncomfortable. What should be the most freeing thing in existence to be like, the most important essence of life actually has no meaning other than what we create for it. That's terrifying to most people because they need rules, regulations. We're so used to it, like what is right and wrong. So yeah, some people feel liberated, like you were talking about, and some people are just, yeah. So is that what you find as well? And like, what's your kind of like, how do you support people through freaking out that like there's actually no rules and it's just a big sandbox?
I like that. It is a big sandbox. I think there's no rules. I think as a belief, I feel like there's no rules, but I do feel like the human nature, the 3D realm, needs a level of discipline.
Yeah.
And so it's this funny mix of like the higher level of consciousness is like this sense of attainment of just pure freedom, and everything that is and isn't totally exists simultaneously, which is obviously why we're in the cycle of samsara and duality. And on the other end of that, people need direction, and this is why being a facilitator or a teacher holds so much power, is because we are in the presence of minds that are very traumatized and sensitive. I'm not going to say unconscious, but let's say there's a level of unconscious minds that are extremely distorted in terms of perspective and what is reality. And so it's so important as a facilitator and as a teacher to gently peel back the layers of their consciousness so that they can self-realize for themselves. Yeah. And that's obviously where you could say the dark side of religion comes in, is because they peel back the layers of someone's consciousness and then they embed it and imprint it with like a template of doctrinization.
I love that.
Yes.
I love the way you explain that.
And so I would say the freedom that we experience in spirituality as a whole, and there's so many different avenues to go, is you have a pick and mix. You have so many different lineages and things that you can choose, but it is truly finding and honing in on your sovereignty as a human being and going like, all of these people are humans too, but who and what feels safe to truly help you unpack you know, your consciousness, and so that you can experience a level of embodiment where you are so attuned to your sense of self and your state of being that you can start choosing your life and your lifestyle from that place rather than choosing it from a place of trauma or victim or...
And we're just coming to the tail end of the podcast. We've just hit 1:1:1.
Amazing.
So there's so much more I want to talk to you about. I barely even scratched the surface of the list of things I want to talk to you about. But one thing, since we're already kind of there, and one thing I wanted to ask you, so you shared in another interview your experience of like lockdown and everything, and how you were like, you know, even though it was a bad experience, you were like, one, because you're partly introverted, so you're like, I'm kind of chill just to like read books, as long as I got some books and stuff. But also, you're okay to be with yourself. And that's what you were explaining, and I completely agree with that. The biggest issue was people actually had to slow down. They're with themselves. They couldn't distract themselves anymore, and they had to be fully with all the noise, and it was terrifying for most people. And you just had a statement. I wrote it down, but I'll see if I can remember exactly what you said. You said something along the lines of that if, you know, your body is your home, your physical body is your home, and and when I say physical body, yes, I include the mind and emotions and stuff. And if you're not comfortable in your own home, then, you know, it doesn't matter where you go, like you're gonna like not be happy. Yeah. And so, I'd love to just like touch on that a little bit, and just what are your tools? Like, I can see it in your face, like, you know, it's like such, obviously, like, this is like, I think at the crux of everything that you do, this like feeling safe in your body. And I feel like everything that's led up to this point, all the experiences you've been through, it's like you're trying to, like, it's like you've gone on this massive journey, like hero's journey, right? All the way back. And you're like, actually, no, I just need to be like cool with being in my body and being myself.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like that's just like everything that you're about now. It's just like being like, actually, like, I'm just going to help you to be okay with being you, and then you can figure out the rest.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd love to just like touch on that, like just some simple practices to, because I feel like we're definitely going to need a part 2.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, so yeah, just anything you want to touch on that, and like something that maybe you could give people to, like, if they're not feeling at home in their body or their vessel right now, what can help them with that?
I think there's 2 things that really come to mind, and you can integrate them together depending on your comfortability. One is mirror work, right? And this is something that I've done almost for 10 years now, and I've always just had this, I don't know, obsession, you could say, almost a vanity about looking at myself in the mirror, and it turned from that into a really spiritual experience. And so I think a few teachers I've worked with also teach this, but just sitting with yourself in the mirror and staring at yourself with your own eyes into your soul and into your own being.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to notice what you're experiencing, like shame, grief, guilt, fear, anger, like all of the things you could say are, I'm not going to say negative, but are harder to feel or harder to experience because they're very uncomfortable. And allow yourself the safe space to really look at yourself with so much presence and so much love, and allow yourself to feel the feeling. Allow it to come up. Some people start crying. They can't look. They have to look away. And just really being with yourself. It's like you want to eye gaze with other people, or you want to have a man or a woman be able to hold you with so much presence, yet you can't do that for yourself. Yeah. So the number one thing is not only do I want to teach people how to be with themselves, you cannot fully be with yourself until you learn. You can't fully be with someone else until you've learned to be with yourself. And so this is the first step of embodiment, is how can you embody the shame and the guilt and the fear and all of these things that you have, I guess, like crucified yourself for, to feel like you can't even hold yourself and you need someone else or friends or family to constantly mask your experience where you don't even know who you are. So that would be the first thing, is mirror work and allowing yourself to have that vulnerability. There's an amazing book by Charlie Morley. I'm just trying to remember it. What's it called? Dreaming into Darkness. Okay. And each chapter has conveniently has an incredible shadow work practice, and it also encourages lucid dreaming, but has a shadow work practice in there. You mentioned some awesome books. I think I might put them in the show notes as well of this episode. Absolutely. So that is a great book that would help people be guided into the self journey, I would say. A second one, a simplest one, is tuning into the breath. And the breath is our life force energy, is the first thing that we do when we come out of our mother's womb, and it's the last thing we breathe when we die. And so this is the cyclical nature of life, our life force, and we don't know how to breathe. And so, yes, as much as going to a breathwork training or class is really important, finding yourself in the center every single day of your being and allowing yourself to just breathe and allow your diaphragm, like breathing in for about 10, you could say, and allowing your diaphragm to press into your lower abdomen. And being with yourself in that. Just allowing yourself 5 minutes a day. If you can't sit with yourself for 10 minutes, that's okay. Start with 5 or start with 2, and allow yourself to build on the minutes each week, because the practice of meditation is the practice of being with. Yeah. And that's the first step. And the most incredible medicine comes through our vessel and our consciousness when we have learned to be on our own. And you shut out all of the noise, and you can actually feel, what is my level of attunement and consciousness to source. And I think coming back to one thing you've like repeatedly mentioned throughout the whole thing is like not being goal oriented. And I think that's what we learn in school, that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and we have to hit that mark to achieve. Whereas I feel like a lot of people in meditation, like, am I doing it right? Like, they don't know, and it's hard because you can't, it's not like, realigning a squat, it's like, okay, cool, you can just adjust your hips. Like, you can't really see what's going on internally. Yeah. So it's also very hard. So yeah, I guess like what's your way of saying you're not doing it wrong? There is no wrong. Like, there's just, the first step. Yeah. Yeah. It's not, and I see that in myself too, the perfectionist, or I don't want to do it because I'm not doing it right. And I think that the first step is just allowing and giving yourself permission to be wrong. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But this is the other thing too, and I've shared this previously, is like people want to go and have these plant medicine, crazy psychedelic experiences. They want to have the best relationship with the most money, and they want to experience fame or fortune or have people love them or care about them. Yet the one thing they're not willing to do is the most simple. So the simplest thing to do is give yourself 5 minutes, because if you can't even give that to yourself, do not expect anyone else to offer you the same, and you'll end up spending your life chasing yourself, trying to fulfill the needs of everyone else and fill everyone else's cups up in your life, and you'll be left at the end feeling empty.
Boom. That was like great mic drop. Yeah. Great, like, little way to finish off, or big way to finish off, actually. So we're at like nearly 1 hour 20 minutes. So there's so much more I want to talk to you about. But I think we'll tail end it there. Yes, one of the things I really want to talk about, which may be a teaser for the episode 2, is because when I was looking into, because in the Western world, we have a very skewed understanding of the spirit realm, right? And a lot of it is very negative. It's like ghosts, spirits, all bad. It's like, look at any kind of Hollywood movies. Like, you very rarely see a good ghost. And that's really influenced us in our relationship with the spirit world. Whereas when I was really starting to get into Tantra, Dzogchen was actually one that had developed that relationship with the spirit world more than any other system. And because I was looking into Shinto at one stage, that led me to Dzogchen. Because apparently Shinto and Dzogchen are really, really interlaced. That's just I obviously don't know Dzogchen as much as you do. But yeah, so something that, we won't get into now, but a little teaser, and to plant that seed, is having a relationship with the spirit world and not letting it be a colored of negativity, because maybe you can briefly touch on it, but your experience, because as I understand it, it's more neutral. It's like, it's like walking through a crowded room, in a random city. It's like people think that everyone's going to be against them when they think of that as the spirit world, but really, like, most people couldn't care less about you. They're doing their own thing, whereas like some are like very like positive and will help you. And, there is the occasional ones that might be a little bit more of a trickster kind of archetype.
Yeah, that's
what
such
can
a broad question.
What can you say on that to maybe as a little teaser for one of the subjects we'll get into next time?
I think it comes back to honor and reverence, particularly when it becomes ancestral, because ancestrally the spirit realm is inclusive of, you could say, your darkest demons and your most angelic saviors. And I think that it all exists. But the biggest or most important key is to deepen your connection with the spirit realm from a place of honor and reverence. And I think that when you connect yourself to your ancestry, particularly, you have guides and guidance that are going to help support your nervous system and your healing in the 3D. And it also encourages ancestral healing and ancestral honor. And that way you can start to work with bigger energies or bigger spirits. And it can be, because there is trickster energy, a lot of people get stuck on the ego, like, oh, I've actually met God or Jesus or whatever. And then they give their power away, like we discussed before. And I think that it becomes more of a weapon rather than something as seen as like an honor, honoring a deep connection, almost like you would have with your friend. And I remember a teacher used to say to me, like, you set up your altar, and if you want to connect to a particular spirit, you basically invite them over for a cup of tea. And so you kind of tune into the energy of what you're inviting in, but perhaps they have, in the physical realm, like a plate of grapes and food. And this is what I really love about, Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism and Taoism and lots of lineages, is that food is always, and water and milk and honey, seeds are always given in honor and reverence to the people past, present, and before them. And that is the biggest key.
And you see this in European folklore as well.
Yes.
Like, there's such a crossover between, like, Indian, like, and Tibetan and Asian approaches to the spirit world and the European.
Indonesia, going to Bali is that's what I love about it, is the sense of honor.
Yeah. And I feel like in Bali, it's like the air is thick with a connection to like spirit realm. It's just, okay.
Have some amazing Bali spirits to share with you at another time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so much I want to delve into.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, yeah, so is there anything else you want to... Obviously, I'll put all the important links to how to get in touch with you in the show notes, but is there anything you'd like to just finish off to tail end it?
No, I don't think so. I think I feel very grateful to like sit in this space of consciousness with you, and for you to, be so intrigued in my understanding of the world. And yeah, it brings me back to myself. And I think that is what I'm deeply grateful for, is you mirroring that to me, as I feel more myself when I get to speak in this way and share the things that I've learned to understand and I'm still being initiated through. And I hope that I get to continue to share, because supporting me to share in this way is supporting so many other people, and it's just like that, the domino effect, like me being able to live and breathe this experience. I'm like, amazing, I get to transcend this experience to others and hopefully invigorate and allow others to step into their sense of consciousness or understanding of spirit and all of the realms.
No, I love that. And yeah, I wanted to talk magic with you more as well, and we'll get on to that next time. But there is one little quote that was in a book of magic, and it talks about the people to talk to about magic. So it's like, at the end it's like, cool, like who should we talk to about magic?
Yeah.
And all it says, and I love this quote, is like, you'll know them by a glint in their eyes and a lull in their voice. And I remember just meeting you, and it was just like, there's this like glint in your eye when I started talking to you. I don't even know how we got to the subject of magic and stuff. And just this like, it's like you just sat into your body before, like, even though I could tell you wanted to be like, oh my God, yeah. Like when I get really excited about it, you kind of dropped into your body, and there was just like, yes, like we'll talk about it another time kind of thing. So yeah, it's just always stuck with me. So yeah, highly recommend, just getting in touch with Anja and being in her presence if you haven't. It's definitely, there's something there, which I'm going to spend another podcast or two delving into a little bit. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And it's been so nice to finally chat.
Oh, thank you. You're making me feel emotional. No, you're not making me. I'm feeling emotional.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute gift. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to and being a part of this episode of Make Yoga Magic Again, the House of Mages podcast. Massive thank you to Anja Rose Tyrrell for being my guest for today's episode. If you'd like to know more about what Anja does, I've put all of her details in the show notes below, as well as what we do at the House of Mages. The House of Mages is a school of yoga, tantra, and the magical arts. We run ritual embodiment yoga teacher training and have an expanding curriculum of courses in developing your magical abilities with some of the best teachers in the world on various esoteric arts. If you're enjoying what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this with a friend. Thank you again for joining. I'll see you next time, and until then, make yoga magic again.